All right, I hope you're patient today. I want to tell you a really good story. This is one of my favorite stories from a book called Tales of the Kingdom. And in Tales of the Kingdom, there's a king, and he lives in a place called Great Park, right? And there's another place called Enchanted City that's the evil place, and it's ruled by the enchanter. And the great king is on a rescue mission to rescue people from the evil enchanter. Right? And this is a story of one of his rescues. And it's called The Sewer Rat and the Boiler Brat. Deep beneath Enchanted City, great sewers rushed wastewater to treatment centers where sludge and gases were separated and then piped to the enormous boiler room for burning. Here, huge vats of boiling water distributed steam through underworld turbines, creating man-made power. Sewer rats and boiler brats, the orphans who manned this underworld, dreaded power-outs more than cold, more than hunger, because then the merciless rage of the enchanter fell on them. The filthy drainage rushed through the great sewers. Sewer rat number one sniffed the air. He had lived in this underworld so long he could smell a backed-up drain a mile away. In the dark, he inched along the narrow walkway above the racing water, headed for drain 75S. Achoo! He sneezed. He had been a sewer rat ever since he could remember, and he always had a cold. Boiler Brat, his best and only friend, talked of up there. Up there were city lights, fires, mothers and fathers. Sewer rat number one had no memory of up there. He only knew the dark and the damp. He thought he'd never really been warm. The only memory of not down here was the sound of a lone, clear note, haunting to sewer rat number one. He couldn't remember the rest of the tune. He didn't know where it came from, just one note, sounding from far away. "Dis here's the drain," he shouted. "Yo, sewer rats, dis here's the drain, 75 south." Other boys and girls crept through the darkness, all miserable sewer rats like himself, orphans, taken into the enchanter's custody at their parents' death with no one to love them, no one to protect them. They were dirty-faced, ragged, ill-mannered, and snotty-nosed. Sewer rat number one shouted orders. "Lower him down now, don't swallow nothing. Hurry up, you sewer rats." 3 boys and 2 girls, holding grappling hooks, were lowered by others into the water. Sewer rat number one scrambled to turn the huge valve that shut the drain. No use losing good workers into the suck-up, the powerful rush of water that occurred once the drain was open. After a few moments, the 5 broke the surface, gasping for breath. Instantly, 5 others dived in. Suddenly, an awful wailing shriek began. The sound of it bombarded the sewer caverns, violently sloshing the wastewater. Bubble trap! A giant air pocket had formed during the hasty opening and closing of the valve. Now the steam in the boiler room would shut down, and all Enchanted City would plunge into darkness. A little girl beside sewer rat number one screamed, power out, oh no, 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 they'll get us now. Now they'll get us." Sewer rat number one hushed her. Number 72, too small to be down here. But little rats can climb into minor clogged pipes and drains. He took her hand as she cried and swung her to his shoulder. "Well, rats, we's in for it. All yous follow me." With heavy hearts, sewer rats dropped from the pipes to which they'd climbed, their bare feet paddling against the wet walkways. The children gathered in the boiler room. The angry maws of the furnace doors were open, waiting for more fuel, but the great boilers were beginning to sputter and spout, shutting down because of the bubble trap. Boiler brats were throwing down their sludge shovels and taking off their hard hats. With dread, they watched breakers already slipping around the iron cauldrons and the maze of blast pipes. These grim shadows crept slowly into the darkening power station. These were the No People, who had given themselves to the enchanter, and now they had no minds but to do the work of the evil ruler. In the dim light, their chalky white faces set off piercing black eyes, full of malice. All held cudgels, brutal clubs with ugly knobs. The huge boilers gurgled and bubbled hopelessly as one by one they shut down. "Mama, Mama," wept the little child, very quietly. Full-scale power out. Flumba! said a boy wearing a suit of Heartsease, flimsy metal-like material that sometimes shielded brats from fire or steam. Falumba! Someone's gonna get it. It was Boiler Brat number 1, Sewer Rat's best friend, and these two felt responsible for all the other children. Yeah, somebody gotta go get broke if someone don't do something fast. You gonna pop the bubble, Boiler Brat challenged? Popping the bubble. It meant diving down to the drain with the valve open, finding the air pocket, piercing it, and hanging on for dear life as squishing wastewater exploded through the pipe. Swimming back was sure doom. A popper could only hope to catch the next pipe. One rat had survived popping, but he was pretty blasted, swallowed so much filthy water he died later of sewer poisoning. Suddenly, the room was filled with fiery light. The enchanter himself had emerged from an opening. A herald's voice cried, "The fire wizard, lord of the death drums, god of the fire priests, commander of burners and breakers." The children, sewer rats and boiler brats, inched toward the walls, tried to sneak behind the pipes, only to be pushed back by the clubs of the breakers. In a rage, the enchanter was hot to the touch. Those who came too close would be scorched. Obviously infuriated, the man who loved fire lifted his head and screamed one heart-shrieking shriek that pierced to the very soul of all the children. Yeah! Yeah! Power outs! Power outs! How many times do I have to tell you power outs are forbidden in my kingdom? Someone's gonna pay for this. Someone's gonna pay. Open his hands. His fingers shot flames. The rats and brats cringed. Oh, oh, wailed a little voice. Number 72 was overcome with terror. Silence! Shouted the enchanter. His voice boomed in the blast room. His flashing eyes were malignant. Who dares to interrupt me? Bring the offender here. Instantly, burners moved toward the girl. A breaker raised a cudgel and jammed it against her. She screamed and fell in a clump. Burners dragged her limp body to the enchanter. Someone's got to do something, whispered Boiler Brat. Silence, shouted the enchanter again, and all obeyed. Even number 72 was silent. She had fainted in fear. The tall fire wizard's voice grew sinister. I think I have a solution. Firing. Firing for 5. Who will walk through the flames? Any volunteers? Here's the first. He pointed at the child at his feet and laughed. Ha ha! Suddenly, sewer rat number 1 sneezed. The enchanter looked at him through narrowed eyelids. Oh, sewer rat number 1, are you the second volunteer? Sewer rat number 1 swallowed hard. He took a step forward. Actually, sire, how about poppin'? A yellow light shone in the wizard's eyes. The burner's pokers flashed. Oh yes, poppin'. Any suggestions? Who's the lucky popper? Sewer rat number 1 pointed to himself. Sire, here's the man. No need for firing, right, sire? The enchanter raised his head and laughed and laughed. Oh, heroics. I love heroics. Why, of course, sewer rat number 1, be hero. Just get that bubble trap out of the drain. I don't care who dies doing it. With that, a signal was given. The burners surrounded the enchanter and exited the room. The breakers kept guard, holding the sewer rats and boiler brats hostage to number 1's intent. The children huddled in a relieved panic in the dim shadows. Suey, Boiler Brat whispered, how's she gonna come out in one piece? Don't know, said number 1, but the bubble's gotta pop. Sewer rat number 1 opened the valve at drain 75 south. These the last dive, the last moments. He shuddered as he thought of popping. He shuddered again as he thought of firing, hostages forced to walk through the flames. He was glad number 72 would be safe for a while, but he would never see up there. What is up there, he wondered. This underworld is bad, dark, and cold. Is up there good, bright, and warm? Fear that made number 1 shiver all over. He sniffed the air. No one was near. He was glad no one could see him shaking. Sewer rat number 1 took a deep breath, prepared to plunge, when suddenly he heard something. He looked up. A soft glow filled the end of the tunnel beyond drain 75S. Burners? No. This man was a stranger, and he stood in warm light. Number 1 thought he heard a note. sounding from far away, clear, strong, haunting. "What are you doing, number one?" the stranger called, standing on the walkway. "Popping?" Risky business. Power out. Wizard's fired up. Know what that means? Fiery. Yeah? "In the kingdom of light, it's always right," said the stranger, and the note seemed louder. "A kingdom?" asked number one. His heart was beating rapidly. "Yes, a kingdom where the king is good, and all the people live up there, and every orphan belongs to somebody." "I don't believe it." The stranger started to hum the one note. Then he stopped. "Don't pop." But firing," Sewer Rat protested. "Close the drain valve, stack rocks from the sewer sliding in the drain, open the drain, the suck-up will force the rocks through the bubble. The enchanter himself knows how popping can be done with no risk to life." Sewer Rat number one looked at the stranger amazed. Could this be true? He struggled to shut the valve. He grunted and pulled and heaved rocks from the siding across the work platform and down into the drain chute. They smashed against the closed valve. He rushed and strained to open the valve. A splash, a tumbling moan in the pipes, and then a bursting pop, followed by a whooshing current, swooshing of wastewater. It worked! Number one scrambled across the network of tubes to the other side. He wanted to see the stranger close up. He wanted to be near his light. He wanted to be warm. "How do you know about this?" The stranger smiled. "I know much more. I care who dies or who is afraid or who is weeping or who is without love." The radiance from the stranger folded Sewer Rat number one in its warmth. "You know this note?" "I know the whole song. Come. Follow me up there, and I'll teach you the rest of to walk in the warmth of the light from this strange and wonderful stranger, to learn." Sewer Rat looked up into the eyes of the man. "But Boily, my friend, number 72, all the rats and brats." "Come with me," said the stranger. Together they climbed through the sewer world, over and steaming. The breakers had all gone. Where to discover number 72 ran to his side and embarrassed him. It was then the children really saw the stranger. And the man's note entered the heart of each orphan child, no matter how dirty or ugly. "He's like my father," each thought, or like my best friend. None knew that all the others were thinking the same thing. "I've heard that song." But what is the rest of the tune? The boiler room, filled with ashes, piles and grime, mounds of furnace clinkers, was flooded with the stranger's soft light. For the first time, the sewer rats and the boiler brats saw how dirty they were, how ragged, how forlorn. They wanted to be clean and sleep in warm places and have someone fuss over them and give them good food. "Come, follow me," the stranger said. "Hum the one note you know, and I will teach you the rest of the music." And the children hummed. The big tough boys and the rough girls and the tiny ones hum. "What about the breakers?" Boiler Brat asked. But the stranger only smiled and hummed the note louder, and somehow they knew they'd be safe with him. Sewer Rat number one put his arm around his friend Boiler Brat, and they all, every last one of them, followed the stranger out of the dark underworld. And they marched after the man, who reminded them all of their fathers, and they hummed the call of the one-note tune out of the fetid underworld and the dangerous blast room, through the city where people stared, past the ashes of burning place, over the garbage heap, to a strange old gate, to a park where trees grew. And no one stopped them because the stranger led them, and they would have followed further, in order to be close to the only one who cared about tired, lost, cold, hungry, and unhappy orphans. Who is the stranger?
Jesus.
He was the king. He was Jesus, and he rescued them, didn't he?
To let you know,
And that's what he does for all of us. Okay, you're dismissed. Adults stand and greet each other.